What's up guys, Top 2 Yugioh here, and today we're going to be talking about skill. And so I always hear other Yu-Gi-Oh players talking about how good or bad other players are, how he or she always scrubs out or has tops or whatever, but it's really rare to find Yu-Gi-Oh players talking about their own skill. And so the purpose of this video is to look at ways to judge our own skill and how good we really are at Yu-Gi-Oh. And so let's go ahead and get into it. And I really think that there are two ways to look at skill. You can look at skill objectively, which means to sort of judge it by your accomplishments. So like for example, if you top your locals, then good for you, no one can ever take that away from you. But you do have to compare that to other players' accomplishments. So you'd have to compare it to players who maybe don't top locals, or maybe they top more locals, or they top more often, or maybe they top other events or larger events even. And then you can also judge skill subjectively. And what I mean by that is by judging your skill based on your actions, your thoughts, and generally how you go about playing the game. And so I really don't think you can do this either one way or the other. You have to look at both and really sort of combine them and look at it from both sides of the coin, because there are a lot of really good players who maybe don't travel as much, they don't have as many accomplishments, and then there are also some players who have loads of tops and wins, but they're really just not that good technically. And that's why you sort of have to look at this from both sides. So the way that this is going to work is that we're going to look at different ways to judge your skill objectively and subjectively, and you're going to give yourself a score between 1 and 10, and then at the end of the video you're going to average those scores together. So if objectively you get a score of a 4, but subjectively you're about a 6, then you would average those together and you'd get a 5. And that would be how good you are compared to other players. So let's go ahead and look at the objective ways to judge skill. And for this you're going to give yourself a score between 1 and 10, and you're going to look at this as a scale of 1 to 10. And we're going to start at 10 and move all the way down. And so you would give yourself a 10 out of 10 if you have gone to Worlds or even won World. And so the reason I put these two together is because if you even go to Worlds, you're in the upper echelon of players. You're one of the highest caliber players at that time. You're one of the best players in your country. And by extension, you just have to be 10 out of 10, I think. And if you've gotten that far, that means you've topped your nats. You probably got your invite. You've done so many different things to get to that point that it definitely, you're worth it. I don't really think that needs too much explanation. And so a 9 out of 10 player would be those who have multiple YCS tops, ARG wins, or Nats tops. So this means that you're consistently doing very well at the highest caliber of events. An 8 out of 10 will be if you have a single YCS top, multiple ARG tops, or a single Nats top. And so topping YCSs or Nats is a huge deal. Topping ARGs is a little bit easier, so that's why I include multiple ARG tops in this case, because ARGs are generally smaller events, and it's a lot easier to top something that's maybe 8 rounds versus a YCS that could be 10 or 11 rounds, or even 12 rounds. So the more rounds, generally the harder the event's going to be. And so ARGs are a little easier to top, and they also happen more frequently than most YCSs or nationals, so you have more opportunities to top a smaller event. So that's why I include having to have multiple ARG tops versus a single Nats top or a single YCS top. 7 out of 10 would be players who have a single ARG top or multiple regional top 8s. So a 6 out of 10 would be the players who have at least one regional top 8, or they can get their invite easily, or maybe they can even get multiple invites within the same season. And the point of this is just to be that you are a consistently good regional player. And then a 5 out of 10, and this is what I think the average player sort of hangs around, would be if you can get your invite in multiple attempts, or that you at least regularly top your locals. So this means that you're a strong local player and an okay regional level player. And so again, I think most players sort of hang around this level of play and accomplishments. And then a 4 out of 10 would be the player who has trouble topping locals, but they can top on occasion, like every now and then they're going to top their locals, but they're just not going there every week racking up prizes and whatnot. 3 out of 10 would be players who cannot top their locals, but they at least go frequently. I think this is actually a pretty good place to be, because if you're going frequently, then you're at least playing a lot, you're going to get better, and then eventually you're going to move up. So this is a good place to be. 2 out of 10 would be people who play, but don't necessarily go to locals. So this would be people who mainly play online or maybe within their own circle of friends. And unfortunately, for the people who don't have events to go to, like they might not be a locals, unfortunately you would have to fall somewhere within here as well. But that's one of the problems with looking at things objectively, which is why we're going to move on to looking at things subjectively a little bit later. And then finally, 1 out of 10 will be a player who has never played. And so again, you're going to give yourself a score between 1 and 10, and don't forget that number, write it down or hang on to it until later, because we're going to average that with our score from the subjective part of this video too. And so I'm actually curious how you do rate yourself, and so I'm going to put a poll in the top right corner of the screen. Let me know how good you think you are objectively, and again, keep that number in your head. So let's move on. So when judging things subjectively, unlike the first part, this isn't going to be a scale from 1 to 10, but rather I'm going to list 10 different skills, and then you're going to give yourself 1 point for each one that you have, and you're going to add those together. So it's a little bit different in terms of the scoring, but again, you're going to have something between 1 and 10. And these aren't in any particular order. It's hard to order which is more important than the other, but they're all very important skills. And again, for each one that you have, you give yourself 1 point. And so the first important skill is that you can effectively evaluate yourself and your results, and that you don't make excuses often. And now this is very, very important, because if you can't even look at your own performance and your own results and then evaluate them and talk about how you can improve, then you're not going to improve. And a part of this is not making excuses. And you always hear players talk about how they might have gotten sacked. So maybe their opponent had like a mirror force. But you have to look at this and say, like, did you know that there was a mirror force there? Was there any way for you to have read that they may have had a mirror force? Or did you just not see it coming? You had no idea of the possibility of mirror force, and it just happened to be one. But in any of those situations, there's something that you could have changed. Next is that you have tournament experience at all levels of play, and that you play higher level events very frequently. And so tournament experience is very important because it's very different playing at a locals than it is playing at a regional. That's different than playing at an ARG. That's different than a YCS or nationals. And so it's important to have that experience, because having that experience is going to allow you to really make shortcuts for yourself to have better success. And then being able to play frequently is also important, because these are all skills that can be gained and lost. If you're not playing, then you can lose some of these skills. The next thing is the willingness to play and the ability to succeed with either meta decks or rogue decks at events of any level. So this one is a doozy, but I think it trips up a lot of players, myself included. And so if you look at some of the best players, and I'm just going to use Jeff Jones as an example, but Jeff Jones is a player who has topped, and he has a lot of success with rogue decks and meta decks. Like he has had some good tournaments with some very random decks, but he's also had great tournaments with good decks, with meta decks. And so a lot of times you either have players who just don't play meta, who are just afraid to play meta, or they just have an irrational hatred of meta. And even now you see this every format, but you have the players now who hate Zodiacs. You have people who hate Necros, who hate Dragon Rulers, who hate spellbooks and don't play them. But then at the same time, you have players who are also afraid to play rogue decks. You have players who do play these meta decks and they say, well, I don't want to play this bad deck because, I might not do as well with it. I want to win. But a lot of times really good players can play with either meta or rogue decks and still do relatively well, because they have many of the other skills, they're confident, and they just have all of the other things going for them. And a lot of times there's even some solid theory behind choosing certain rogue decks. Next is that you build your decks based on theory rather than what other people play. And the vast majority of players do build their decks and make changes based on what other people have done. That's why deck profiles are so popular. People look at deck profiles and they look at what players are playing, and then they just change their decks accordingly. Like, I've seen players play the exact same decks as something that topped, and there might be like a 2-card difference. Like, you chose Twin Twister versus Cosmic Cyclone. You see the player that topped played Cosmic Cyclone, and then you just switch to Cosmic Cyclone thinking that that's all that you need to do well. But a lot of times this goes back to that first thing, being able to evaluate yourself. And so when you're constantly changing your deck based on what other people do, you're not really evaluating your own skills properly. And then at the same time, you're not using theory to build your deck, which makes your deck inherently weaker. Because like using theory to build your decks helps you understand it better, helps you make better decisions, both, when you're deck building, of course, but also within the game. And it's something that is indicative of skill. Next, we have timing. And so better players generally know when to use their cards, holding them when they're needed. And so you want to be a master of timing. Now this is very hard to quantify, but I think if you're always running out of resources, or if you feel like your opponent always has that next play, then you probably aren't holding your cards right. So if you feel like every time you play against Zoo, they always have that extra barrage, they always have the Terratop, they always have whatever they needed to win, then you're probably not holding your cards correctly. You're probably using them too early, and if you're using them too late, then a lot of times you'll know it. Now the next thing is that you are a master of manipulative and persuasive skills. And again, this is something that is also hard to quantify, but you have to be honest with yourself. Like, how good are you at manipulating your opponents and making them do what you want to do? An example of this would be leading your opponent to summon a board full of monsters, knowing you have a Raigeki or a Dark Hole or a Slumber in your hand. Or maybe you want your opponent to attack, knowing you have a Mirror Force. And so being able to manipulate your opponent with certain cues to make them do what you want to do is a very important skill. The next thing is that you are a master of rulings and game mechanics. Now this is obviously important because you need to know how to play the game. Like, you just have to know how to play the game, what does what, and all sorts of interactions. And knowing rulings and game mechanics helps you make interactions between cards that you've never seen before. Or even between cards that you have seen, it helps you sort of bridge the gap between something you may have not seen in a long time, or something that you just don't understand at the current moment. But if you understand rulings and game mechanics, you know how to read the problem solving card text, it goes a very long way. So like recently I was talking to my teammate Alan. He recently topped ARG Richmond like last week or 2 weeks ago, and he was telling me so many of his wins were just because he just knew rulings and game mechanics better than his opponents. And this is so true. But also a part of this is being able to understand what you don't know. And so if you don't know a ruling or a game mechanic, you just can't ask a judge, for example. You just can't ask a judge, hey, if I do this, what will happen? Because that's sort of like coaching. So you can only ask a judge once you've already made a play. And so part of being a master of rulings and game mechanics is knowing, how do you say, how not to misplay even when you don't know something. Because sometimes you might not know the ruling, and if you make the wrong play and your ruling is incorrect, you just lose. And so you have to also know how to make the correct plays around what you do know. Next, you need to be a master of sequencing. And so the order in which you play cards is extremely important. And I know I've said all these things are important, but they all really are important, and sequencing is no different than the others. And so there's a huge difference between playing like barrage and then terratop and then your diagram versus playing your diagram, then your terratop, then your barrage. And I'm just using Zodiac True Draco as an example because that's what I play. But in every single deck, there's a big difference in the order in which you play things. Like if you play Burning Abyss, should you special summon your Burning Abyss monsters first, or should you summon your Tour Guide first? If you're playing Demise True Draco, should you play Duality or Pot of Desires first, or your Card of Demise first? The order in which you play your cards makes a huge difference. And not even just playing your cards, but the order in which you do everything. Because everything you do gives your opponent information, and how you do it and when you do it gives them more information, really. And so this leads us into our next skill, and that is being effective at dealing with information, so sending and picking up on both true and false reads. And so this means being able to send your opponent true and false information, being able to read your opponent's true and false information. And this goes back to a lot of players who always say they got sacked, like the players who think it's never their fault, they never take responsibility for their games, but a lot of times it's that their opponent put the thought into their head that they didn't have anything, when in fact they did. So it's like when you hold a Raigeki for an entire game, and your opponent doesn't think you have it because you didn't play it, and then you wait and hold it until that moment to where your opponent has a full board of monsters, and then you Raigeki them. And it's relatively common to hear about players mention making reads, but it's something that's actually very difficult to do. But I will probably make a video on this another day. This is already a little bit longer because this video is already a little longer than I expected. And so now the final skill is knowing your role within the game and then how you're going to win it. And although this sounds very easy, it's actually pretty complicated, especially in decks that have higher ceilings where you have so many different options. You have so many different ways to win the game, but they're not equal. You have to choose the path of least resistance and the path that's going to get you there the quickest. Like you want to win as soon as possible. There's no prize for taking longer within a match. And generally there are 3 ways to win games. And it's related to the 3 different resources, of course. I've made so many videos on those, but you can either win through out-resourcing. So you can either win by out-resourcing your opponent with card advantage, you can win by not letting them play via tempo, or you can just kill them, OTK them so that they run out of life points, or you can deck them out, both of which are the philosophy of fire. And so those are the major ways that you win games, and oftentimes you have to pick between which one is going to be the most effective at that certain time. So you have to be able to read the game state, and then make a plan for what you're going to do. Now this is so important because I remember I was playing against Dinos the other day, and I had bricked awful. Like I mean, of course it's not too bad because I was playing Zeus, so I had a Trident and some fake back row. Like it was like Fusion Substitute. I forgot the other one. Like something completely useless against dinosaurs. Yeah, I think it was like I don't even remember. Maybe like a barrier or something. But what had happened was my opponent had a very strong hand, and he had like the Miscellaneousaurus to protect his board. He could have summoned Ultimate Conductor Tyranno to flip all my stuff face down, attack over all my monsters, and attack direct with a True King for game. So he definitely had game, like undoubtedly so. But instead of choosing to beat me through life points, which he could have chosen to do, he instead decided to try and win the game through tempo. He tried to lock me down by summoning a VFD plus a Ding Long. And so he already screwed up because he didn't choose the path of least resistance. He chose the hardest way to do things. And so what ended up happening was I actually broke his board, and after breaking his board, he didn't have enough resources to continue within the game, and ultimately I ended up winning. And that's just one situation to where you choose the wrong way of winning the game. I actually made a mistake of this the other day when I was testing against one of my teammates, Sean. He had max seed me, and of course at that point I had the option to just stop. But instead, I thought maybe I should try to beat him through decking him out. And so I tried to summon as many times as I could. I was playing a Link deck, so you could do all these Link summons with like Predaplant, Scorpio, and Cobra, and all these different plays that I had, and I thought I could deck him out, but I couldn't. And so I had chose the wrong way to try to win the game, and that ended up costing me the game, because I couldn't deck him out, and so I ended up losing the game on resources, because he had drew, 30 cards. So it's very important to know your role within the game, and then to know how you're going to win that game. Choosing incorrectly can oftentimes cost you that game. So these are the 10 skills that are important in Yu-Gi-Oh! And of course there are more, but I thought these are the 10 most important ones. And what you're going to do is give yourself 1 point for each of these. And then you're going to add that to the score you gave yourself earlier for your objective score, and then you're going to average those together. So again, if you have like a 4 objectively and maybe a 6 subjectively, then you average those together and you get a 5, which would be a pretty good representation of how good you are relative to the other players. So I'm going to use myself as an example. So if we look at things objectively, I have not gone the worlds, of course. I don't have multiple YCS tops or wins or multiple Nats tops. I don't have a single YCS top or multiple ARG tops, so not an 8. However, I do have multiple regional top 8s, and I do have an ARG Circuit Series top. So that puts me at a 7. If I were to go through things subjectively, I would definitely think I'm good at evaluating my own skills. That's why I made this video. I have a lot of tournament experience, but I wouldn't say that I'm willing to play rogue decks at any level of event. I'd play rogue decks at locals maybe, but I wouldn't take a rogue deck to like a regionals or anything, because honestly I don't think I would do as well, and personally I don't think it does good for my testing circle either, because no one wants to test against rogue decks. But I wouldn't give myself a point for that. Next, I do deck build based on theory and statistics. I would think that I'm relatively good at timing and holding my cards and using them when necessary. It's not very often that I run out of resources or that I have ways to interrupt my opponents, but I use them too quickly. I feel like I'm very good at timing and holding cards for the right moment. However, I don't think I'm a master manipulator. I don't have amazing persuasive skills. Like, of course I can sometimes lead opponents into making incorrect plays, but I wouldn't say I'm a master of this yet. This is definitely something I need to work on, so I wouldn't give myself a point for that. And a lot of times when playing better players, I notice that they're a lot better than me. Like, I remember I played Billy Break earlier this year, and I could almost just feel how I was walking right into what he wanted me to do. Next, let's look at rulings and mechanics. I think I'm okay at rulings and game mechanics. I'm like a RC1 certified judge, which is like the lowest level of judging. Like, I've passed that test, but that's like super irrelevant. But there's still a good amount of rulings that I don't know and don't understand, and that I do forget sometimes when in an event. So I wouldn't say that I'm a master of rulings and game mechanics either. I'd say I'm average, but not good enough to give myself that point. I'm not a master. When it comes to sequencing, I do think I'm very good at that, because I do play a lot, and this is something that really comes with experience. And I just do a lot of test hands as well. So I do think that I'm a master of sequencing. I rarely feel like that I play things out of order. Next, when it comes with dealing with information, I think I'm very good at sending reads, picking up on reads, so I'll definitely give myself a point for that. Then when it comes to knowing your role within the game and how to win it, I would give myself another point for that. And so that actually gives me a 7 out of 10 for both of them, which I guess that really just means I'm a 7 out of 10. But if, let's say, for some reason I thought that I was a master manipulator and I gave myself an 8 subjectively, you would average those, so you'd have 7 plus 8, and then you would divide by 2, which would give you 7.5. But again, for me, I think I'm more of a 7. And now the reason I think this exercise is so important is because it helps you identify what you need to improve on, and it also helps you set some goals. So like, again, I'm going to use myself as a personal example. I think I need to work on my manipulative and my persuasive skills, and a lot of that comes with the way you talk, what you say to your opponents, your body language. These are all things that I can work on. I also need to get better at rulings, game mechanics, because again, like I said, I'm pretty average at them, but I wouldn't say I'm a master yet. And oftentimes I do forget things, and I look at cards and I don't think about it sometimes. Like, I don't think about the difference between the card text that a lot of times does make a big difference. So those are things that I can work on. And then possibly with that, maybe I would feel comfortable taking more rogue decks to regionals and other events, and that would help me improve as well. So that's how I could get better subjectively. Then when looking at my objective score, which helps you sort of set some goals, like I said, I have multiple top 8s at regionals. I have an ARG top. I have like some 1K ARG 1K tops. I have some ARG states tops, like other little things like that. But it helps me set that goal because I look at this and I say, now I need to top a YCS, or now I need multiple ARG tops, or I need to top Nats. And so it really helps me focus in on what I need to do and focus in on how I need to get better and improve my own standing within the game. Because nobody likes sucking. Like, everyone wants to be good at something, and whether that's Yu-Gi-Oh or not, like, you just want to be good at everything you do, really. Like, you don't, losing isn't fun, you know? And so I think this is extremely helpful for improving your results. And so there's going to be a poll in the top right corner of the screen. I'm curious how good you think you are between a scale of 1 to 10. Again, I think I'm about a 7. Let me know where you are at, because I'm very interested to know. Again, poll is going to be in the top right corner of the screen. Sorry this video was so long, it was a little longer than I expected. But if you did watch this far into the video, let's do a hashtag. So if you watch this far into the video, do hashtag. So let's do hashtag scrubs. So if you watch this far into the video, drop hashtag scrubs down in the comment section so I know you watched it. I'd really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all of you who have watched this far into the video. And so once again, I did make another video about skill a while ago about whether Yu-Gi-Oh was luck or skill. I think Yu-Gi-Oh is about 80% skill, about 20% luck. And I'll put a link to that video in the top right corner of the screen. But of course, if you think this game is more luck than skill, then a lot of this video is irrelevant. So, let me know whether you think this game is luck or skill too in the comment section. This is something that I am going to make a couple videos about while we're waiting sort of between the ban list. Because we still have like the old ban list in effect. Then the June ban list doesn't start till next week. And I sort of need... I need something to talk about, but I don't want to talk about just Zoo anymore because apparently you guys are tired of that. But so this will do for now. So this is going to be the video about how to judge your own skill. The next video is going to be about gauging your opponent's skill. And then I also want to talk about some ways to get better. And this video is sort of a start to that, but I'm going to give you some like actual tips into getting better in that video. So thanks for watching once again. Definitely subscribe if you're interested in getting better at the game, because there are going to be more videos about skill coming up very soon. Probably tomorrow, the next day, and every day this week. But I hope this video was informational and useful to a lot of you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And then if you're really trying to improve your game, you should strongly consider subscribing to the channel, because my goal here on YouTube is to build a community of good players, and then to improve my content, improve my own play, and then that's going to allow me to help you guys improve as well. And the best way for me to do that is through uploading more videos.